to join me in welcoming our guest speaker today from Irish Aid, Anne Holmes, who's the Health Policy Co-Lead in the Department of Foreign Affairs Development Cooperation and Africa Division. And Anne is going to make some opening remarks. And Anne has a background in humanitarian action and business process development. She's worked with Irish NGOs and Department of Foreign Affairs for almost 3 decades. And recent overseas assignments include Deputy Head of Mission at the Embassy of Ireland in Malawi and Deputy Head of Cooperation at the Embassy of Ireland in Ethiopia. And currently Anne is the lead for health crisis preparedness and response, including COVID-19, for sexual reproductive health and rights and domestic partnerships, including with the HSE and with RCSI. And Anne is a key person for us in our relationship with Irish Aid, and we work very closely with Anne and her team. And Irish Aid is a vital partner for the HSE in all our global health work. And we've had an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with Irish Aid since 2010. And we seek to align our work with Ireland's international development policy, A Better World. And one of the most important things for me to say is that it's through the support from Irish Aid that we've been able to implement our partnership program in ESTHER Ireland. And we're really very grateful for that support that includes the running of the program and the small grant program that many of you have been beneficiaries of. And we're very delighted to be entering into a new phase of funding agreement with Irish Aid. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Anne. Well, you're very welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks a million, David, for that impressive sounding introduction. I think.
Would you mind standing up?
Actually, yeah, I have to apologise because I had an epic printer fail last night, so I don't have my notes. I have them in tiny text on the screen. So if you can hear me all right. It's actually easier, otherwise I'm going to end up with a complete migraine trying to kind of like read from there to here.
Don't worry, Lindsay will turn them to you.
Okay, super, thanks a million. Yeah, and there's slides anyway, so you have something pretty to look at least. Just one thing just to Nadine, thanks a million for the invitation, and to Maisie and to Hala for helping with the organisation, and thanks again, David, for the introduction. I think you very nicely glossed over the fact that I have no background whatsoever in health, so I'm feeling very intimidated and humbled and delighted to have the opportunity to be here today so that we can do exactly what we've been kind of guided to do, which is like network, get to know each other, and trade information backwards and forwards, because that really is, I mean, we are the Department of Foreign Affairs, we were the Department of Foreign Affairs and trade at one point. By trading though, I mean the biggest thing that we trade in our department is information. So, you know, everything that you guys are doing, it's essential for us to have, you know, as deep and as comprehensive an understanding of that so that we can support you correctly and effectively, and that we can then kind of use that experience to leverage and to build Ireland's profile and to do the right thing for Ireland and in the international scene and with regard to global health in particular. Sorry, now as I'm chatting, I've just lost my nose. I might end up having to wing this big time for sure. Okay, I'll move on swiftly. Oh yeah, shout actually to the colleagues online. Shout.
Don't worry,
if you can't hear, you'll shout at me. Yeah, great, thanks. So what I'm just going to do in the kind of the brief session this morning before handing over to Louise then will be just to very quickly give a run through of A Better World, which is Ireland, not DFA's, but the Government of Ireland's international policy, policy for international development. And thanks again to the colleagues who basically did my job for me because they brought it. So it means, again, I can condense the presentation down a good bit. So A Better World, our Ireland's policy, was developed in 2018 and launched in 2019. So actually a good year before the onset of the pandemic. And something that kind of is worth noting is that we're all discovering as the kind of pandemic is not over, but as it eases, that we're going back to where we were in 2019 and realizing that a lot of our plans and a lot of our strategies are no longer relevant. Thankfully, we can't say the same for this. You know, this still is very relevant, largely because it is hooked so clearly and carefully into the SDGs that very nicely have been dotted. And the SDG framework, so the Sustainable Development Goal Framework, the Agenda 2030, is still very live. In fact, probably because of the pandemic, and there's been so much regression in the progress that was made towards a lot of the SDGs, health in particular, the emphasis and the need to deliver on the SDGs, and then for Ireland to deliver what we have committed to in this framework is as important, if not more than ever before. So I've said already, it's a whole of government. DFA is responsible for drafting and for the oversight, but we're not exclusively or solely responsible for the delivery of this. And what it does is it sets out the Government of Ireland's vision for a more equal, a more peaceful and a sustainable world. So it elaborates, yeah, you can stay on that one. It's the one before. Sorry, I should have checked it. Yeah, because it's just an overview. It sets out the government, it establishes our 4 policy priorities for Ireland in the area of international development cooperation. And these 4 priorities are gender equality, good governance, reducing humanitarian need, and taking climate action. So these 4 priority areas are what Ireland really is concentrating in all of our international development and in all of our international diplomacy actions. These are what we are really pushing to achieve and to focus on. And that these drive what we do then in all of our broad intervention areas. So our health engagements are part of our intervention areas. Other intervention areas include education, include social protection, include all of our work that we do on food and food security, etc., etc. So it's a very wide-ranging and it's a far-reaching policy, firmly rooted in the SDGs, as I mentioned already. So the next slide would be great, thanks. If you go delving into it, looking for the health chapter, you're not going to find a health chapter because it is such a broad document. But if you go to the Our People section, if you want the kind of the quick grid, if you go to the Our People section, it's where you will see the most concentration of text that sets out our thinking and our vision and our plans and our understanding of the global health agenda. And what you will see there is, that health remains central in this policy. So we have had policies prior to this, we've had white papers on aid, and the development of this policy, whilst it's very firmly linked to the SDGs, has drawn very heavily from our traditional and long-standing engagement in social sector development overseas. And health and education in particular have been areas where Ireland has long-reaching and far-reaching engagements over the years. So this new policy, still in relative terms new, is commits to keep health front and centre. So health remains central to our engagements going forward. What the policy also does is that it really places an emphasis on putting the furthest behind first. Again, drawing on Ireland's long tradition. I mean, people who have been engaged with Irish Aid or DFA or with NGOs previously will know that we used to talk a lot about the poorest of the poor, and we have very kind of strong focus around about getting into the last mile and making contact, and we're a bilateral donor, so government to government donor, but we also tend to invest probably more than other donors, possibly more than in the UK. Our engagements and our relationships with civil society actors and community-based organisations will be a very particularly defining characteristic of how Ireland works in the international development cooperation scene. So furthest behind first is remaining a very key agenda for us, and within furthest behind first, women and girls in particular are a focus for us in all of our engagements, but including health. In a similar vein, equity and access to health, to social services, be it health, be it education. So a big emphasis for us is ensuring that there is equity of access for all, so that there's, we are actively seeking to ensure that there's marginalised groups, women and children in particular, people with chronic illness, disability, etc., that they are, really, that their needs are represented and advanced through all of our engagements. So the policy also commits to maintain a disease focus around where we have typically and traditionally been engaged, and that is around about AIDS, HIV, TB, malaria, and other communicable diseases by 2030. This is where my lack of a health background comes in. I can't even pronounce half of what I'm saying. So the emphasis is remaining where we have been, but it also acknowledges, if you read into the document, it also acknowledges that non-communicable diseases and mental health issues are increasingly being recognised as an important dimension, and their burden on health systems is being recognised. So as and when we have the capacity and the resources and the know-how to deliver on those agendas, we will do. And already we're actually looking to integrate, do more on mental health through our humanitarian work and via some of our SRHR work as well. So we're probably going to be taking an integrated approach as opposed to bolting on a whole new mental health dimension, at least for the time being. The policy also, it's in a similar vein again, so enhancing our health engagements in crisis situations, recognising that people in crisis situations experiencing them or at risk of them represent some of the most vulnerable, therefore potentially the furthest behind. So again, it's a reflection of that particular emphasis steer that we have. And within crisis situations, again, there is a further focus that we would do more than we have done previously on health, and within the very broad spectrum of health, that sexual and reproductive health and rights will be a focus for us going forward, recognizing that humanitarian situations, be they man-made or conflict related, really do exacerbate the incidence and the need for treatment and care around about sexual and reproductive health. We're also nearly there on this side, working to better integrate health and nutrition. Over the years, Irish Aid in particular has been very active in the global scene around about delinking nutrition from health, because up until about a decade and a half ago, whenever you raised nutrition in the development context, you went, oh, that's a health thing, the doctors will sort that out. And we've worked very actively with partners such as the UK and the US to try and bring a broader ranging approach to nutrition, which is this multi-sectoral. You have to have your food people involved, you have to have your education people involved, you have to have all sectors involved. You can't just park it in the health department. We have been very successful collectively globally at broadening out the nutrition agenda so that it is more comprehensively approached and understood. And now that we're in that safe space, we can actually take a step back into addressing health through our nutrition, our nutrition through our health engagements, with a particular focus on wasting. So that is likely to be something that you may hear us talking about increasing over the next couple of years. And okay, so everything I've said to date is more or less, we're doing more and better of what we have been doing previously. We want to do better ourselves and with all of the partners that we work with. The one thing that is really new and strikingly new within the policy is a very specific commitment to develop a new initiative in sexual and reproductive health and rights. So I'll speak a little bit more to that actually in the next slide, probably, just in the interest of time. What I'm just going to do, again, in the interest of time, I was initially going to go through the four policy areas and speak to how health is interpreted and understood in those. I think I might just skip 3 of them and concentrate on the gender one, because that's where the ESTHER initiative is. And then because we're here for the day and there's such an emphasis on interaction, then if anybody has a particular interest or wants to know more or is planning to work on something to do with health and climate change, or health and humanitarian situations, or health and governance institutions, give me a shout and we'll chat it through, and I'll try and help in that regard. Okay, I've lost my notes again. But could you go, you're on it already, great. So I'll just focus on the gender one. That's okay. So gender equality, as mentioned, a huge priority for Ireland, has been and always will be. We see poor health as a hindering factor for women, particularly regarding their political and their economic participation. So equally, and you'll see and you'll hear when you read through, when you get a chance to read the policy, you'll see this text echoed. Equally, we see inequality manifesting itself in terms of poor maternal health and reproductive health. So in our approach to gender equality, that's Ireland, stroke foreign affairs, we want to see a transformation in gender equality globally. And in our global health efforts in particular, we want to deliver transformative health outcomes for women. So our understanding and our next step of those kind of high level commitments is that we understand that investments that improve the quality and the availability of health services, which have a strong focus on maternal and reproductive health, are essential, and they're kind of the strategic entry points or continuation points for us where we really want to focus. So this focus, this commitment isn't new for Ireland. We've had long-standing engagements globally and in partner countries that have been focused on maternal health. What is new for us, and why it's labelled a new initiative in the policy, is this kind of very explicit and highlighted commitment to sexual and reproductive health. And we have, I guess that is because the policy was being developed at the same time as there was a significant change in the legislative environment in Ireland with regard to sexual and reproductive health, which is the introduction of the termination of pregnancy bill and the follow on through. But it's not solely and exclusively linked to that. But that shift in the legal framework in Ireland meant that as DFA, we were able to engage with the broader subject of SRHR in a much more 360 degrees. So it's an opportunity that presented itself that we've jumped on, because I guess the situation in Ireland with regard to that one small, relatively speaking, dimension of the sexual and reproductive health agenda did actually hold us back a little bit in terms of how influential and how outspoken we can be. We now are on a par with the EU agreement on sexual and reproductive health. So we can kind of take our place a little bit more comfortably and confidently at the tables around about policy dialogue in particular on these subjects. So very quickly, again, where we are on the development of that initiative, we have completed a mapping of our existing engagements in the sexual and reproductive health and rights environment. And probably should have said at the outset, DFA of our ODA, which is our official development assistance budget, roughly 20% of that is tagged to our global health expenditure. So the kind of, I'm sometimes slow to reference the amount of money because really for a country like Ireland, and if you look at the global health agenda more broadly, the 20%, which is roughly 100 million that Ireland spends, is a drop in the ocean. In financial terms, it really is a drop in the ocean. But the kind of the real value of Ireland's contribution to delivering a better world is how we back that up and what we do with it. And it's the people and it's the partnerships and it's the networking and it's the influencing and everything that we're about here today that really does make that 100 million, you know, quadruple in terms of its impact. So of that 100 million, probably 50 million of that could actually correctly technically be termed sexually relevant for the sexual and reproductive health agenda. And that includes our HIV work. That includes everything that we have been doing on antenatal care and postnatal care. That includes everything we've been doing in the sexual and gender-based violence agenda as well, and more. So, so it's good to be able to put this new initiative in the context of actually we've been doing an awful lot of this already. So then what's going to be new? Or what's going to be in addition? We're planning, like I mentioned earlier, to kind of do more and better of what we have been doing to date. But we're also looking to the SDGs and to the SDG indicators that relate to sexual and reproductive health, and particularly the one around about reducing unmet family planning needs and reducing the incidence of adolescent pregnancies. Because I'm not sure I need to explain that to a room full of health professionals, but we just know why we know why those investments really are long lasting for the individuals at question, but for society at large, and why they are strategic. So we're likely to consolidate what we have been doing in the SRHR agenda, more make that more meaty. We're then likely to add on a component around about addressing unintended pregnancies, of which, if I remember my stats from the train, it's 121 million unintended pregnancies globally at the moment. And because the progress towards meeting the SDG of reducing unmet family planning needs has stagnated and probably decelerated, and because of COVID, that 121 million is probably going to increase quite, maybe not exponentially, but quite significantly over the coming years. And we also know from the United Nations Family Planning Association that 60% of unintended pregnancies end in termination, and 50% globally of those terminations are unsafe. When we move to the continent of Africa, lower middle income countries, or low income countries in particular, where our focus is, the proportion of unsafe terminations is 94%. So we're a whole thrust to let's try and just head these off the pass. Let's try and make sure that we don't actually get to the situation where we're looking at 94% unsafe terminations and all of that comes with that. So focus on improving access and supply. We're also going to be focusing on trying to improve the enabling environment for legislation around about family planning needs or sexual and reproductive health more broadly. And we're looking in particular to find a way to capture and document the Irish experience and the Irish story, dating back potentially to the 50s to Dr. Noel Brown. I don't know if that's a name that's familiar, Dr. Noel Brown and the mother and baby schemes from the 50s, which was probably a milestone. Well, I think I understand it to have been a very significant milestone in terms of health for Irish society, but for women and children in particular, newborns in particular. So we'll be looking at that. So we'll be looking at that story from Dr. Noel Brown's time through to 2018, the changes in legislation around about termination of pregnancy, the free contraceptive initiative that I think the Department of Health has just recently announced and launched. And also then there are plans, there's a bill going through the Houses of the Oireachtas at the moment, has been for a couple of years, around about improving access or making period products free as well. So there's a lot that's going on positive in Ireland that we want to share and that we're going to package and offer out through our mission network. So I'll keep going, I think. Probably shouldn't say too much more anyway because we're still in consultation phase, but we will be coming back to consult. 1 minute remaining. Okay, right. Actually, this question then I'm definitely going to jump over all the other slides. Would you mind then just popping down to skip the next few? This one, okay. So Nadine, I think asked in advance of this, would I ever in these kind of, in speaking to a better word, will I also then just kind of cover a question around about or give some reflections around how might the Irish Health Service, Irish health institutions, and just kind of broadly take that as Irish health actors, because in the profile of the room, how might we do more to contribute to the delivery of a better world through cooperation and collaboration with lower middle income countries? The answer, you already are. I mean, like everything that the HSE has been doing, everything that the ESTHER Partnership is doing, you're already delivering on, you know, what it is that we can and we should do. So the multitude of engagements that have been delivered by the partners in this room and that have been planned for by the partners in this room, they're all walking definitions of the type of kind of people-to-people skills, knowledge and evidence-based engagements that we feel that Ireland has to offer. Going back to the point around it, we can offer cash, but really we can, you know, we can make that cash go so much further when we back it up by, you know, real peer-to-peer learning and engagements. And I think just a quick sidebar, if I can ignore that 1 minute sign for a minute, I just think the timing of this conversation is very pertinent because, you know, looking to the pandemic, you know, there's a multitude of lessons that we have all learned from the pandemic and how we prepared for it, how we responded to it, and how we're looking to move on from it. But I think one of the biggest learnings very early on for everybody was that, you know, our global health is not an out there subject. You know, the health of the population in the Democratic Republic is as important and relevant for people in Ireland. We can't put boundaries, we can't put walls around health. We can't put walls around viruses. Equally, we can't and we shouldn't put walls around our health systems. So, you know, those kind of divides that would have been there previously, we're all kind of, I think we're all very much on the same page that, you know, we need to see a much more just, we need to see a much more equitable, and we need to see a much more functional global health system. And key within that global health system is, you know, for that health system to be efficient, for it to work, there has to be information exchange, there has to be knowledge exchange, there has to be learnings exchange, and that's what this is all about. And it's no longer, what's very nice as well in terms of the learnings, is it's no longer, I guess, typically, traditionally, we would have approached this as a sort of a charitable endeavor, you know, that this was nice for us to do. We didn't have to do what it was nice for us to do. What's excellent is that finally everybody's on the same page of this is not advice. This is, you know, this is not charitable. It is rights, it is justice, but equally it's self-serving, it's self-interest. And that's good. That's not a problem. So long as it is shared, so long as the end result is that we're all in a better and a safer position. Okay, I'll skip all of this and go back to my minute. Okay, so steers. What might we? So yeah, particular steers. I mean, I'm stating the obvious. The event of today, this is exactly what it is. Share information, learn more about each other. I would say to organizations that aren't already, if when you're kind of developing your partnerships or advancing your partnerships in any of the countries where you are engaged, if you haven't already made contact with the Irish Embassy, do so. Let them know who you are and what you're about. And don't consider it just as, oh, I better check in and tell them what I'm at so they can keep tabs on me. It's quite the opposite. Use that as your opportunity to go in and find out, well, what are you doing? If you are active in the health sector, which we are in Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, Mozambique in particular, but also in other countries, if we are active, there are people in there, there are resources in there that you should be drawing on and that you should be kind of trying to find a way to interact more consistently with. If you are, if you're active or seeking to engage in a country where we have an embassy, but we don't necessarily have a particularly strong health engagement, that's fine. Still make those connections. See if the embassy can help you point out what their understanding of the health needs are, what their understanding of the health architecture is, where the gaps are, importantly, where the risks are. I mean, it's not easy. There are risks. And there is, you know, there's always risks of duplication, there's always risks of going in the wrong direction, there's risks of being uncoherent. So anything that you can do with the embassies are there to help and to serve. So use that network. If you're not following us, Irish Aid or Department or Irish Foreign Ministry on Twitter, do so. Stalk us. Happy to be stalked so that you know where we are, because you know it's when we all know what we're doing that we can collaborate and we be more effective. What else? Use the IGHN. It's already doing a fantastic job. I think it's hugely important. Well done to everybody that's involved. We're all owed a debt of gratitude to that, and continue to use the format and the events are really, really helpful, especially for those of us who are trying to figure out what all global health agenda actually means. All of these terms are. Better understanding of Department of Foreign Affairs. There's another just advice maybe would also to be, there's the health sector. I mean, you're not a law unto your own, or you're not a world unto your own, but you are a very specialised group relative to a lot of what other organisations. But Ireland's engagement in development cooperation is much more expansive than health. And there is a real depth and richness in the Irish humanitarian tradition, so, and the NGOs in particular. So the likes of Concern, Golden Throat, that you might not necessarily associate as being, well, they don't do health, so, or at least not in the way that we would understand or recognise. But as organisations, they are really highly rated in the countries where they operate. They have tremendous networks, they have tremendous knowledge, tremendous links. And how they do business, I think there's definitely stuff that can be learned in terms of how those organisations do business, how they organise themselves, how they manage their relationships, how they fundraise, all of that. So, you know, if you have contacts with those organisations, leverage them. If you don't, but in any case, actually, if you're not already subscribing to the DOCUS newsletters or members of the DOCUS group, DOCUS is the Irish NGO Humanitarian Development and Humanitarian NGO Coordination Network, DOCHAS. Sign up, subscribe. They have great weekly newsletters. They have, you know, they do training, they do workshops, and they're a tremendous asset and a resource. So I really would encourage, even if you're kind of an individual or a small group of individuals, figure out what else they are doing so that, and you can learn from them. It doesn't have to be health related, but you can learn from the broader way of organising themselves. Okay, I'll stop because I think I've totally abused my position there. But I'm just going to do one last thing. Can I just use this as a barefaced pitch? If there are any of the organisations that are here at the moment that are already active in the ESTHER or HR space, or planning to do partnerships or enter into partnerships in any way, shape or form related to any dimension of the sexual and reproductive health agenda, would you give me a nod or give me a shout? Because I'd love to really know what you're doing, what you're planning. Because anything that I can gather that will then help feed into our analysis and how we shape and how we structure that initiative would be hugely appreciated. So thanks, sorry. Oh, have a lovely day.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Anne. You know, it's funny, you think that you know things about the better world and the, you know, the strategy and the focus, but it's so useful to hear that. So useful. So thank you. And I'm sure it's useful for all of us just to hear that. We are running a little bit late, but how about one question? Because Anne's going to be with us all day, and it's, you know, you can get more value, I think, in just face to face. But is there one question? Anybody has one question that you'd like to just throw to Anne? Yes, Peter. I'm sorry, Peter, would you just say your name and the partnership? So
Peter Harrington from the Coordinating Health Partnership. Before Richard Firth stands up and takes the floor, it's the same question, so it's only one question. It's wonderful to see you mention NCDs, and that a good look at the agenda for today. It's sort of very hard to find the word NCDs anywhere. And I think we need to be waking up to the fact that NCDs are already the rising and continuing to rise epidemic of the developing world. And they're completely clueless in general about how to manage them, because they're used to programs in that are structured from the top down, or the ones for HIV. So it's great to see you specifically with your sexual